You have seen the image 1,000 times. A vast desert, 3 perfect triangles rising from the sand, impossibly sharp against a pale sky. You think you know what they are. Ancient tombs, built by slaves, mysterious, maybe alien. You think the story is settled. It is not even close to settled, because almost everything you believe about the pyramids is wrong, not a little wrong, fundamentally, embarrassingly, gloriously wrong. And the truth, the actual truth that archaeologists have pieced together over the last 4 decades, is far stranger and far more human than anything you have been told. Start with the biggest myth of all, the slaves. For centuries, the story was simple. The pharaoh was a god-king, the people were his property, and the pyramids were built on the broken backs of tens of thousands of enslaved workers driven by whips and fear. It made sense as a story. It fit the image of ancient tyranny that history taught you. Then, in 1990, a horse stumbled into a hole near Giza. That hole turned out to be a tomb. Not a pharaoh's tomb, a worker's tomb. And the discovery that followed, led by archaeologist Zahi Hawass, would completely overturn the slave narrative. The workers buried there had names carved into their walls. They had titles. They had families who mourned them. And when researchers studied their bones, they found something extraordinary: evidence of advanced medical care, amputations that had healed cleanly, skull surgeries that the patients had survived. These were not disposable bodies worked to death. These were people someone had invested in keeping alive. Further excavations uncovered an entire workers' village, bakeries, breweries, a medical facility, cattle bones suggesting the workers ate better than most ancient Egyptians. The workers who built the pyramids were paid laborers, skilled craftsmen, logistical specialists, rotating teams of men who appear to have taken genuine pride in what they were building. Some inscriptions even show work gangs giving themselves names. Names like Friends of Khufu, names like Drunkards of Menkaure. These were not slaves. They were something far more interesting. But here is where it gets stranger. Because once you accept that the pyramids were built by a willing, organized, well-fed workforce, a new question tears open. How? How does any ancient civilization, without steel tools, without the wheel in widespread use, without cranes or computers or modern engineering, stack 2.3 million stone blocks into a structure so geometrically precise that the 4 sides of the Great Pyramid differ in length by less than 5 centimeters across a base that stretches 230 meters on each side? That number should stop you cold. Less than 5 centimeters, across 230 meters, using copper chisels and wooden sledges. Researcher Mark Lenner, who has spent decades excavating Giza, estimates that at peak construction, the Great Pyramid required placing one 2.5-ton block every 2 minutes during daylight hours. Every 2 minutes, for 20 years. The logistics alone are staggering. The stone had to be quarried, transported, shaped, and positioned, all in a world without GPS, without radio, without project management software. And yet, the alignment of the Great Pyramid to true north is accurate to within 1/15 of a single degree. Astronomers have traced that alignment back to a specific star that occupied the true north position around 2500 BCE, suggesting the ancient Egyptians used the night sky itself as their surveying instrument. Your ancestors were not primitive. They were watching the stars while your distant descendants were still learning to read. Now here is the twist that most people never hear. The pyramids may not have been primarily about death at all. You have been taught that they were tombs, giant stone coffins for god-kings obsessed with the afterlife. And yes, the burial chambers are real. But researcher Juan Antonio Belmonte and a growing number of Egyptologists now argue that the pyramid complexes functioned as vast economic engines for the living, not monuments for the dead. Think about what the Pyramid Project actually did. It employed thousands of workers, and those workers needed food, tools, clothing, and housing. The state had to organize supply chains across hundreds of kilometers. It had to develop accounting systems to track labor and rations. It had to train administrators, engineers, doctors, and overseers. In building the pyramids, Ancient Egypt essentially invented the large-scale state bureaucracy. It invented project management. It invented, in a very real sense, the organizational structures that all complex civilizations would eventually inherit. The pyramid was not just a tomb. It was a machine for building a civilization. And then there is the question nobody asks. Why did they stop? The Great Pyramid building age lasted roughly 5 centuries, from about 2600 BCE to about 2100 BCE. After that, the Egyptians kept building monuments, but never again attempted anything like Giza. The pyramids of later dynasties are smaller, cruder, structurally inferior. It is as if the knowledge, the specific, intricate, hard-won knowledge of how to do it at that scale, simply vanished. Researcher Kate Spence of Cambridge University has proposed that the answer lies partly in resource collapse. The cedar wood needed for construction sleds had to be imported from Lebanon. The copper for tools came from Sinai. The organizational capacity required to sustain those supply chains depended on a political stability that the Old Kingdom eventually lost. When the state fragmented during the First Intermediate Period, around 2150 BCE, the knowledge ecosystem that made the pyramids possible may have collapsed with it. Civilizations forget how to do things. This is not ancient history. This is a pattern that repeats. But here is what stays with you, long after the facts settle. The men who built the Pyramid of Khufu knew they would never see it finished. A structure built over 20 years by rotating teams of workers means that most of the men who laid the first courses of stone were dead before the capstone was placed. They built something they would never see completed. They poured their lifetimes into a project whose ending they could only imagine. And yet, they showed up. Every morning, in the heat of the Egyptian sun, with copper chisels and wooden sledges and a bowl of beer, they showed up. You look at the pyramids, and you see mystery. You see ancient aliens, or slave labor, or the obsessions of mad god kings. But what the archaeology actually reveals is something quieter and more astonishing. You see people, organized, skilled, proud, mortal people, who decided that some things were worth building even if you would never live to see them whole. The pyramids were not built despite human limitation. They were built because of it. Because humans are the animal that looks up at an impossible task and says, "We will start anyway." Tonight, when you feel the weight of something too large to finish, something that might outlast you, remember that this feeling is not weakness. It is the same feeling that built the Great Pyramid of Giza.